Welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. I love finding other women our age who are serving more women our age. We are the wisdom holders, and perhaps the greatest wisdom we can share is to help our sisters navigate this time of life. I haven't talked about the podcast theme for this year of late, but it goes like this: That was then, this is now, design your own next chapter. My guest today is doing that in her own life, as well as helping others to make this chapter their best chapter. I connected with Maureen quite by chance on Instagram, and I'm so glad I did. She's gentle and caring, an inspiration for her community, and certainly practicing what she preaches. Listen now. I have said on numerous occasions that our generation really doesn't have many role models. Our parents were mostly old by this age. So when I read on someone's website, we are redefining the next few decades of our lives to ensure we live our lives to the max. The goal is for all women to live vibrant and healthy lives filled with connection, purpose, and adventure. I know I want to meet that person. Browsing around that website, I found bright, somewhat philosophical articles by Maureen herself, guest writers who weren't afraid to rant a bit, something I never do. Excuse me. And asides like, don't ever be afraid of the strange things that make your weird little heart happy. I also love a statement by one of the guest writers. Aging does not mean stopping. It means you now have an accumulated wisdom that is unstoppable if you want it to be. Let me introduce Maureen. Maureen Atkinson, welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast.
Oh, thank you, Agnes. It's great to be here.
I'm looking forward to this chat for sure. Can you just start by telling us how you moved from a corporate mover and shaker to the designer and inspiration behind Lifeshiift?
Um, well, it's an interesting journey, and I guess it's part of my journey is part of what inspired Life Shift. So my husband and I had a very successful retail consulting company, but he was several years older than I was. So I could see that it was a situation where I didn't want to be left holding the bag, so to speak, if his health went downhill or anything like that. And he had some health challenges. So I knew once we sold the company that I would really want to do something different. But the something different was just something that it was in my head. Anyway, so we did. We sold the business, and which was great. And then about 4 months later, he passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that was quite a journey in itself. So going from, managing this high profile business, selling it, and thinking that we were going to kind of coast downhill. We had an agreement to stay and help the people who bought it. But then all of a sudden, my life really changed. And so it took me probably about a year. I had several coaches along the way, and I always recommend if people are wondering where they're going next, coaches are great. You have to find the one that works for you. Um, but I was talking to one of my coaches, and then all of a sudden it came to me, this is what I want to do. I want to help people through this journey. And that's kind of where I got going on Life Shift. And I thought of it as being a journey of retirement, although I'm never really retired, just changed what I was doing, um, and widowhood and those kinds of things. And I was determined I was going to travel, although through a good part of it, it was COVID, and so I didn't travel for a while, but it helped me kind of come to terms with adventure, the idea of adventures. And I think I saw a number of my friends who seemed to get smaller after they stopped their career work. They seem to not have the same kind of energy. And the same thing happens, I think, to widows oftentimes. So if you have it together, the chance, I think, of you sort of saying, okay, I the best part of my life is already gone, and I'm not really going to try very much. And um, so I am not happy with that, ladies. I want
Yay.
you out there having adventures.
And that's
And
why
I
you're
just,
here today.
yeah, I look at some people like, people, well, Jane Fonda is kind of
Mhm.
an easy one to point to, but there are lots of really interesting, vibrant women who, keep going and do kind of really interesting, different things, but still have that same vibrancy, that same passion. That's what we want. We want to bring the passion.
Yeah. Keep the life in life. But okay, now
Yes,
speaking of
exactly.
life and life shift, why two eyes in shift? I have to ask that.
Well, I'll tell you very honestly. I started to register the name for the computer for the
The website? Yeah.
internet, and as soon as I started looking around and testing different names, all of a sudden they all became very expensive.
That's when you know you're onto a good idea.
That's what people have told me is, yeah, there are all these people who just sit on the sidelines and they buy up all these URLs, and then they sell them back to you for thousands of dollars. So anyway, I thought, okay, I'll put two eyes in it. And that's what somebody said to me. Just misspell it. So anyways, yeah.
That's
I
great.
could make up a story about it all being about I, but that was really a very functional reason why I did it.
Well, at least it was a choice. It wasn't just a typo that you ended up with.
Exactly, exactly. No, it was not a mistake.
That's great. I'll never forget the very first time that I was, and this goes back a number of years, where I woke up with this idea and the URL and everything. And I went online to buy it. Like it was 2 in the morning, but I just knew it was such a good idea. And same thing, it was $6,000. And that was back then. And it just convinced me that that was a great idea. I mean, it was there, it was available. Nobody was sitting on it, but it was obviously such a good idea that great gods of the internet were going to charge me an arm and a leg for it. So, but
Yeah.
okay, now you mentioned travel, and in many
Mhm,
ways, you seem to be the poster woman for your community. You traveled when you were young. Is it different
mhm.
now traveling as a older woman? I use air quotes there.
Um, well, I used to take pride in making it hard for myself and doing sort of tough travel. Now I take pride in making it easy for me, So I never really. I stayed at some pretty flea bag hotels and stuff like that as I traveled. Although I have to say that I had two kinds of travel because through my career, mostly I had jobs where I traveled. So, and so even when I worked for a department store chain, I ended up in the buying office. So I ended up traveling that way too. But I also traveled going to stores, so that there was that kind of business travel. But then when I traveled for my own, I tried to do it as cheaply as I could. And now I've really convinced myself that and I'm fortunate enough to be able to afford it, but I do go business class if I'm going on a long flight. And my husband was a big believer in spending money wisely, but also making yourself comfortable as you go. And I really encourage people to do that.
I've got a friend who's actually going on a trip in a few weeks with her sister, and her sister is fairly well off. And my friend was saying, "Yep, I got business class just like she did." She said, "I refused to turn right when my sister turned left."
Well, I mean, it is a challenge if you travel with somebody who has a different kind of mindset, and that's why it's good to really agree to those things ahead of time.
Right,
Um, because if you're traveling with somebody and you're going to be miserable because you're doing it on the cheapest possible way, then it's not going to be fun for you.
right, right. Do you have a favorite destination now as a traveler just for fun?
Oh, well, I have destinations that are in my mind. Well, I mean, I have to say, my daughter lives in Rome, so Rome is a place I go back to. I just revisited Paris, and I hadn't been to Paris for eons. I went before the Olympics, so not during,
Yeah.
but I went before the Olympics, and I really realized how much I love Paris. But there's so many amazing places. Last year, my niece lives in Penang, and the other one lives in Singapore. So Penang, Malaysia. And so that was a whole other experience that I'd been to Asia before, but I'd never been to that part. So those were new destinations for me, new countries.
Do you prefer like totally different cultures, or Italy, for example, isn't that much different? It is, but it isn't.
Ah, if I'm spending time, I like to spend time in a culture that I kind of really understand. I really love Mexico too.
Okay.
Mexico's a place where I could spend a longer period of time. As a matter of fact, one of the things I am thinking about doing in the winter time this year is going to Mexico for a month and taking Spanish lessons every day
Okay.
because I've tried, and I have a slight facility with Spanish, but I think in order to get good, it's way better to be right there,
Yeah.
you know,
Immersion.
where everybody's speaking Spanish and
Yeah.
you see signs in Spanish and
Yeah. Yeah. I've got another friend who is from Toronto also originally, but she's lived in the Dominican Republic for the last 25, 30 years. And yeah, she talks about that slow but sure getting comfortable with Spanish. Married to a fellow who is Latin, and he takes the easy way now of letting her speak Spanish, and he's real lazy about learning English. So it's just one of those things of some people want to learn a new language and some don't. But they say too, in terms of aging, it helps the brain to
oh
learn new
yeah, oh
languages.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do have a fairly good, I basically say I speak restaurant languages in probably about 5 different languages. So I love eating enough to be able to read menus in different languages, but I certainly have a reasonably good facility with Italian. And Italian and Spanish are very similar.
Mhm.
So, as a matter of fact, my son-in-law, who is Italian, says that he can actually, even though he's not necessarily Spanish speaking, he can go to Spain and be understood. You know,
Mm. Yeah.
there are some different words and there's different pronunciations of certain letters, but for the most part, structure is very, very similar.
Yeah. My son-in-law is Spanish, and the day it came clear to me how good his English was is when he started giving me some razz about something, like teasing me. And I thought, okay, you're really mastering this English language if you can now start teasing your mother-in-law about something. It was pretty funny, just
Yeah.
that light that came on. Now you talked about restaurants. A friend of mine is also a solo traveler, and she says that she always chooses busy places to eat, and then as much as possible, she'll eat at the bar because you can strike up a conversation with somebody
Mhm.
near you, whereas at a separate table, it's a little bit more isolating, and that's how she, gets talking to locals and other tourists and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's lots of things you can do to kind of meet people, and that's a great way of doing it. The other thing that I heard, and I love taking just day tours, walking tours, in a 2 hour walking tour or something like that. But I was talking to this one woman who is a bit of a nomad, and around, she's definitely in our age group, but she said what she does is she likes to go on a walking tour, and then she meets people along the way, and everybody mostly on those walking tours are tourists, and then she just sees if anybody wants to have dinner that night,
Oh, that's
you
a good
know
idea. Yeah.
and I think that's definitely accept. You have to be able to kind of feel comfortable about asking people, but a lot of people who are traveling are happy to, even if they're couples or you know pairs, they're happy to have somebody else join them because it just makes it all more interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And you must have some curiosity if you're traveling anyways, so it's
Yeah,
just an
yeah.
extension.
The other thing I love, which is a great way to meet people and a great way to learn about a culture, is I love to take cooking lessons.
Uh,
So if I can find a cooking class, just it's really sort of fun because you get to understand the ingredients, you see how it all goes together, and yeah, I mean and then you also meet other people because a lot of people in cooking classes are also travelers.
if you ever need to experiment, you've got my email address.
Exactly,
I love it when
exactly.
other people cook for me. Okay, on a more serious side, I read somewhere that you're into goal setting. Is that even
Yeah.
now and I use the word retired in air quotes also. When I say retired, I mean you gave up the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 8, whatever it was. Um, but does goal setting, is that still part of your life?
It is. And I see, I feel like my big goal is life shift and to really sort of have the maximum kind of impact that I can with life shift. But along the way, I have a whole series of smaller goals, to that are personal. Some are personal, and then some of them are related to life shift itself. But I really want to respond to the people who are the women who are part of life shift, so I want to make sure that I provide that information that they're looking for as well, which I may not necessarily be wanting to do that. But yeah, so I think my goals, like I have the big goal, and then I have some personal goals. So for example, my big goal is to uh, bring uh, more people into life shift, but a personal goal is I took my yoga teacher training, and that was I'd always done yoga and I really liked it, but I thought, do I want to, am I happy to just do what I do, take the occasional class here, do some online classes, or do I want to kind of really go farther? And so that's what I did. I got my certification. So,
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I had 3 kids in 3 years, and I realized that the only way I was going to show up for class twice a week, every week, was by becoming an instructor. So I became an instructor way back in the day, and
oh, good
it
for you.
worked.
Wow. And you had 3 kids too.
Oh
Holy
yeah, well,
mackerel.
finally figured out what was causing it. Um, now I know some women our age who they're tired. I think you used that word at the beginning. And they're sort of like resigned to getting old.
Yeah.
What goals do you suggest they set to pull themselves out of that slump?
Well, I think, that it really starts with mindset and really understanding that, that this isn't the end of your life. This is just the beginning of a different phase of your life. And that I think is, if you go into that mindset, then I think then you automatically start thinking about goals because you kind of say, what do I want for this part of my life? And, so for instance, what will my purpose be? How will I help other people? But I think you first have to believe that you can. And I think there's lots of opportunity to look around and see amazing things that people are doing
Yeah.
in this part of their lives. People are writing books, they're doing all sorts of things, volunteer work, but to have a purpose, to really kind of understand what you want to have happen. And then it's much easier to set the goals that relate to that. But that feeling of really, I can do this is really a kind of challenge. And I think it's very easy to find, oh, I'm too old for that. Oh, that ship has sailed. That part of my life is gone. If that is what you're thinking, then you do become smaller. You have reduced your possibilities. And what a shame to lose lives like that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Mm.
I've said the only thing that it's pretty obvious that I'll never do now is ever since Camilla, I'll never marry Chuck. But
You know, yeah, I just wanted to say, my sister and I were talking about this weekend because she lives near an indigenous reserve, and she went to a powwow, and she said at the powwow, they very specifically at the powwow have a place for the elders, and they have this great respect for the elders and that life experience. Somehow you and I have to make sure that that comes to the broader population, and that it isn't always about when you're 25 and oh, you can do all this. It's like respecting that wonderful knowledge and yeah,
yeah, yeah, wisdom that comes with
wisdom.
age is just amazing.
Absolutely.
And I love it when I have a young guest on who points that out and respects the fact that
Hmm.
the one advantage we older women have over our younger counterparts is that wisdom. And
Hmm.
a smart younger woman will take advantage of it. So, but in the past, I've discussed how, that slump can become almost like a downward spiral.
Yeah.
And the hardest part is probably putting on the brakes, but then, like each tiny step back up turns into an upward spiral, it's sort of like energy breeds energy,
Mhm.
like when things start happening. Do you find that?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think as you find, you're not going to succeed at everything, and nor did you when you were 20. I mean, you're not going to succeed at everything, but every time you have a success, you prove that you can, and that there is this positivity, um, and there is this notion of, as a positive person, you attract positivity to you, and so it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak, that virtuous circle where it becomes the upward spiral.
Yeah, yeah. I come with notes, and I was then going to ask you about being a yoga teacher, but you told us about that. That's great.
Yeah,
So, do you actually lead classes now?
I do, but I don't have a regular gig, so to
Yeah.
speak. So I am kind of looking at what I do with that. But in October, I'm myself and another woman are hosting a day-long retreat, and so I'm doing a whole section at the beginning on yoga and meditation to start the retreat, and then we go from there. She's an artist, so it really has to do with finding that creativity and artistry within you. So anyways, so I'm doing some of those things, and I am going to do a series of yoga videos,
Ah,
procedures. So
oh,
yeah,
good. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because when you were talking about you didn't have a regular gig, I'm thinking, well, when you start having those retreats for your community, and then that's exactly what you're doing. So we're on the
yeah,
same
yeah,
track
yeah,
here. Talk to me about
exactly.
meditation and mindfulness.
Um, well, I'm a big believer, and I've meditated for years, and a lot of times I do it by myself. The thing about taking the yoga was that it also included what's called pranayama, which is the breath work and really they say that yoga, the physical side of yoga, was really designed to open you up so that you can do this amazing breath work, so that then you can find that core of spirituality within you. And so it does become much easier if you do have a physical practice that gets you to that point. But like I have meditated on trains just, as and if you close your eyes and really concentrate, you can start to block things out. But it's a practice. There isn't really a final ending in it. I just do 10 minutes a day, and I think that the 10 minutes, if it's better to do 10 minutes every day than it is to do a half an hour here and a half an hour there. It's that kind of going into yourself and finding a kind of center. There's a really good book called The Power of Now, which you probably Eckhart Tolle is from
It's in my
your part
notes.
of the world, but that notion of the future is not now, and the past is not now. Like the past has already happened, and so you can't experience anything but the now. And finding that now, meditation helps you find that now, that kind of moment where and you may still like hear the bird chirp or something like that, but it's really that sort of quietness. And it's amazing I think what it does to your sense of peace, it's easier to find joy in things. But if you can't meditate, then I think mindfulness, just going and, sitting and watching nature, looking at leaves and on trees, looking at, nature is just it exists in the now. Yeah, I'm a really big believer, and I think it does. I think I'm a calmer person because I do this. I think I was, like a lot of professional people, gotta go, gotta do it, press, 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 all of that kind of thing. And it's hard. It's hard on your body, it's hard on your mind. And I think your create it, if you're not mindful, then your creativity is not as good as it could be.
Right. And gratitude also comes in there if you're in the
Oh,
now,
absolutely. Yeah.
being grateful for the trees outside or
Hmm.
your husband's artwork behind you.
Yeah.
The listeners didn't hear that part of our conversation before. Ageism. Do you encounter much of that?
Um, don't uh, I find there's more sort of systemic ageism than people doing that to you personally,
Hmm.
like so took when I applied to become a yoga teacher, I said to the fellow who was running the program, said, "What about my age?" Because I'm very honest about my age. Anyway, he said, "Yoga's for everyone." No, which I thought was a very good point of view. I mean, they feel like a lot of Eastern societies, they believe that older people are very much part of, that circle of life, so to speak. So I don't know that I run into it personally, but I sure see some ads and things, and I just want to
Slap them. Oh,
scream
those are
at
mine.
it and say, "What?
I get
How
physical.
could you be so stupid?" Or they have these older women who are screechy and a little bit dopey, and it's like,
And they all wear
really?
Depends.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I find that actually, like a person's self ageism. Now, you talked about people who say, I'm too old for that.
Yes.
You're aging yourself by responding that way. And
Yeah.
you've got to
Yeah, I
put,
mean, I think I wrote a blog that said, are we our worst enemy?
okay, yeah,
Um, our older people our worst enemy because the moment you start, stepping back and saying, I can't do that, that ship has sailed, then it has. It has for
yeah,
you.
yeah,
But by communicating that to other people, you're encouraging them to think that there are these finite limits, and that they apply to everybody, and they don't.
yeah, yeah. And I think too, if you treat yourself as an old person and tell other people that you're too old for something or you're old, then they could start treating you as old. And their definition may be different. They may think, oh well, crazy old woman is downright feeble.
Yeah.
And so it's like let's not risk that. So
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing I just saw this week. I was looking at books, and do you know who Iris Apfel is? Do you know she's
you're wearing her glasses. Of course, I know who she
well,
is.
yeah, like except hers are like this
I
big.
know, but they're
Um, she's just released a book called Color, which you can imagine. She just died, I think, this
yeah, this
year.
year. Yeah.
uh, But she started that book when she was 102. So hello? you know?
Yeah,
You know, you can't do something when you're 70. Oh,
yeah,
not
yeah.
so
And I
much.
mean, just using the word color as an example, like to have a colorful life, whatever that looks like. And I don't mean you have to wear
Yeah.
red or purple or bright pink, but to have stuff to talk about, things that you're doing. Now,
Mhm.
d- I'm just going to go back to my notes here. You and I are both, as we've just discussed, in the middle of this aging thing. I love learning new stuff. I love keeping active. I
Mhm.
love creating. I love meeting other women who are or who want to be on this same journey.
Mm.
Is there any one of those pieces, like creating, learning, any of those that you think are more important, or are they all equally important?
I think what is most important is the notion of flexibility. So being able to, because I've heard people say, "Oh, I don't use a cell phone because I can't figure it out." It's like, well, that's not very flexible, when the whole
Yeah,
world is using it. But so I think flexibility, so physical flexibility, but also mental flexibility and be able to do those things. But it's really curiosity, I guess, keeping that sense of curiosity and joy and maybe that's a kind of childlikeness where I mean children just every day they experience something and they fail all the time, but they don't kind of say, okay, well, I'm not going to walk because, I just fell down and I can't, so I'm not going to learn how to walk. It's so I guess the idea of curiosity and flexibility and um, I think that is because you will have learned so much, but it's like really and really appreciating. I think when you said gratitude, that idea of being able to reflect and be grateful for so many things that have happened in your life that have been wonderful. You know? And the more
yeah.
the more you see wonderful things in your life, the more there will be more wonderful things in your life.
You mentioned childlike, and when my kids were young, I used to say the only reason I had children was so I could keep on jumping in mud puddles. But that said, I had my 3-year-old grandson a number of years ago. He's 14 now. And summer rain, it was a beautiful, warm rain. And to this day, he remembers me he used to stay with me quite a bit, putting him in a pair of underpants and gumboots and sending him out to play in the rain and jump in puddles and stuff like that. So yeah, just that childlike behavior. It's not childish. It's
No,
childlike. And
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And it's being, that incredible joy, experiencing that joy of jumping in a puddle and watching it go all over the place. And
yeah,
it's just wonderful.
yeah, no, I agree. What haven't we touched on that you want other mid-age women to think about? And I use the word mid-age because I was born and I'm not dead yet. So I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But what have we not touched on that you want mid-age women to think about, to even to embrace?
Well, what I do want to kind of emphasize is that it doesn't come without some effort, you know?
Hmm,
I think health comes with effort, it comes with regular exercise, it comes with good eating habits, those kinds of things. And it comes with kind of thinking about and reading about things like mindfulness and so I think it's important to it does sound like it's all effortless and in the end it is effortless but it takes effort to get to that effortlessness if I kind of confusing things but I do think the notion that if you really want it to be good, make that your goal, make that your ultimate vision of what your life in at this point in time will be, and then go for it. Read all about what's happening in the world, and then new ideas and thoughts, um, and take care of yourself, learn about what makes what works for a body that's our age. Not everything works as well. um, and then do it, and do it regularly. It's kind of like, not like you sit there and wish for it. You've got to work on it. Um, but then it's worth it. It's just, then that's a life that's worth living in. So, there can be so much fun and joy and everything in it at this point in your life. Yeah.
That's really interesting because I think it's one of those things that I know, but I've never really thought about. But you talked about learning Spanish.
Yeah.
I or Italian, Spanish, and then I intermittently learn Spanish. And
Yeah.
you talked about the child who falls down and doesn't never ever says, "Well, I guess I'm never going to walk then." It's like you get up and you try again and you try a different way, and the effort is
Yeah.
so worth it in the end, even if the painting, goes in the garbage bin, like whatever. It's you've learned something about yourself. You've learned something along the way. You may have created something, and yeah, it's always worth the effort. I'm gonna have to make a new sign for
Yeah.
my window.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, having done 'cause the course I took was 300 hours of yoga, and I have to tell you that my body is different from when I
Mm.
started than when I finished it, because I was doing it regularly. I was, part of it was practicing beyond the classes and things like that. So really, so that's effort. It didn't, my body didn't reshape itself just by me wishing that it would. It has really reshaped it, made, it stronger, and more flexible, than when I started. It's really, but there's still things I can't do, but that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, next year. Tell us about your online community.
Yes, well, I think my online community is really women. I guess for me, I see them kind of as friends, and they treat me that way. They send me notes and things like that and say, oh, this newsletter was great, and oh, it all really rang for me. And I, I have women who I have a group of women who are widows, um, because it's a lot of women at that point are looking for some reassurance that their lives will continue, which it does. You just pick yourself up, and it's not. It hurts. It's really, but to have that, and then I think they're all like, I think what would be in common with them is that they all are not happy to just say, okay, I'm old and that's it. Like, they all have plans or ideas of how they learn and grow and do things differently. um yeah, as they come along. So
I think what I love most about this podcast is meeting women like you. And I think there's we got to have a little, I don't know, tin can and string between us all, because
Yeah, you need to you need to have a tea party with everybody
Yeah,
who's been on. I've listened to some of them, and they're really
yeah, yeah.
amazing podcasts for
Well, a
sure.
little foreshadowing. It's in the works. Not a tea party,
Oh,
but
good.
thinking of
Okay.
something. I got a flip chart over here, and I'm drawing lots of lines and trying to figure it all out. Where do we
Yeah.
find you on the World Wide Web?
The my website is www.lifeshift, which is spelled Lifeshift.com.
Okay.
So lifeshift.com. And so the website is there. There is also um, a YouTube channel where there's a number of videos that a lot about my travels, but also just inspirational women that I interview and that kind of thing. So and if you go on my website, you can sign up for uh, my newsletter, and that comes out every 2 weeks and has lots of good information about what's going on in the world.
Okay. I've got it open right here. So as soon as we're done, I'm going to go sign up. I've got to keep in
Ah,
touch with what you're doing.
yeah, that's great.
Before we close, can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
What is a career service award from the International Council of Shopping Centers for research?
Oh my gosh.
It's so impressive.
Yeah, I know. I said, "Oh my God, it sounds like I'm really old when and I wasn't that old when I got it." But it's really International Council of Shopping Centers is an organization of real estate professionals, mostly retail real estate professionals, and it's malls and shopping centers in general. And my function within our consulting business was I ran the research department, and so we were very active in that in the ICSC too, and so I was on their, you know, boards and
Right.
various committees and things like that. So, yeah, and I got it in Las Vegas. Who knew it? So they shipped me down to Las Vegas, and I got to go up on stage and get an award. So they have a very large convention in Las Vegas. And anyway,
Well, I just interviewed Tina a month or so ago about living. She thinks everybody should retire to Las Vegas, and she has the reasons why. It was a lot of fun. But
yeah.
so, in terms of research, is that things like viability of location or certain stores in certain locations?
Yeah,
What?
yeah. I mean, there's you know, there's certainly this notion of what kind of people live in an area. Typically, what happens with retail real estate is that, you know, you can attract people from a wide distance, but the key people who support a shopping center, a store, or whatever, are the people who live closest. So it's really kind of having a good understanding of who's there and then matching up what kind of stores make sense to serve those people. And the emphasis is on service. It's not shoving,
Okay.
you know, things down people's throats. Now, a lot of times people don't know what they want, um, but uh, but a lot of times they can tell you, or you can, um, you know, if it's new to the market, then you can say this makes sense to this particular um, kind of customer. But there are numbers like you know, I think people think they can just build retail anywhere and it will be successful. And that's not true.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you have to have a certain number of people to support a certain amount of square footage and stuff. But the rest of it. But it's also creating some magic with it too. So while the numbers are good, it's also really understanding what can be.
And that's where your curiosity was
Yeah,
bred.
I know, I know. I loved it. Yes. And we belong to an international organization of retail consultants. So we could really kind of understand, what was happening in Brazil, what was happening in
Okay.
Spain, what was happening in France, and what was happening in Asia. So it really, while it wasn't all applicable in the context of the local markets, you could kind of understand how that trend came to be and how it might be applicable within your own markets. So
I
anyway,
think there's a whole bunch of listeners out there that said, well, that makes so much sense, but it's not a career I ever thought about it really existing. So thank you for
yeah.
explaining that. That's great.
Well, it's funny, because like I'm a Virgo. My sister says I the ultimate researcher, and um, and while I had them, I really kind of understood numbers. Um, it was hard for me to figure out what kind of career I would actually want, and I would be interested in. So I really didn't want to be a mathematician or something like that. But research is a good option. So
Oh, there you go. I'm a Virgo also, and people
okay.
go like, "What haven't you done?" Because I was the person that just kept on trying different things. Oh, this is fun.
Yeah,
I'll do this for a few years. So,
yeah, yeah.
okay. Your website link is in the show notes, and all of your links are on your page at our website. Listeners, Maureen's past included a very corporate career, but nowadays she's inspiring women like us to make this chapter our best. What would make this chapter your best? Talk to us. Leave comments where you're listening, or if you're listening at boomwithabang.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and talk to us there. Maybe there's a question I didn't ask Maureen. Ask it in the comments and I'll get you an answer. Your stars and reviews help us grow, so be generous. And share this episode. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Maureen's community sounds like a great place for you and your friends to find others to go far with. Lastly, a reminder that you can help support this podcast by buying me a coffee. That link is in the show notes, or sign up at Substack and get a new conversation delivered to your inbox. Maureen Atkinson, thank you for being my guest today. You really are an inspiration.
Thank you, Agnes. I love what you're doing. So keep it up for sure.
Well, we're going to have to keep in touch for sure.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of week.
Okay. Thank you.